Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul, and in this Radeon RX video I have a very simple question for you. Which graphics card in Nvidia's current lineup is very obviously absent? And that's right, the GTX 1080 Ti. We've seen a Ti in, well, multiple of Nvidia's last generation cards, which naturally sits between the top of the line Titan and the secondary tier, which is generally like the 980 or the 780 or what have you. In this case, we've got the 1080, and then we've got the Pascal Titan, but no Ti. Now, there are multiple theories as to why this could be, but the most logical behind them is Vega. Now, obviously, we don't know exactly if that's the reason, but there is a good theory that Nvidia basically wants something to counter AMD with later on. Now, of course, we'll get more into that in just a moment when we talk about the possible specs about the card, but let's talk about them here and now. So, PC World have discovered a rather interesting job listing over on LinkedIn. I won't read through all of it, but it does say, and I quote, 980 Ti users get first spot in line for 1080 Ti pre-orders or step-up offer. Now, analysing the latter part of that, it's obvious that this at least indicates that if you've got a 980 Ti, you're going to probably get something off of your 1080 Ti pre-order. Now, how much that is, well, down to imagination, but I'm going to assume it's not going to be a few bucks. I'm going to assume it's going to be something substantial enough to where people don't feel too pissed off or ripped off, because obviously, in which case you might as well just simply stick it on eBay. Now, it's not really surprising, however, that this job offer has popped up. And it's most probable, with CES coming up early next year, that if there is any, at least official conference, I mean, obviously they could handle, put out a live stream anytime they so desired, and then that would be Bob's your uncle. But if they wanted to do it at least at a conference, the most obvious one, the next one, is going to be CES. Now, there are some rumours, and some rumours is a huge understatement concerning the specifications of this particular card. The most prevalent of those is that it has 10 gigabytes of VRAM, and this is popped up through several shipping manifests. Now, obviously at the end of the day, there has to be some cuts, and reducing the amount of VRAM is certainly one of those. The only issue with it, however, is that it has been labelled as 384-bit memory bus, which is kind of weird considering a 10GB VRAM would most likely indicate 320-bit would be used. But it is possible it's because it's an engineering sample. At least in theory, however, that puts the memory bandwidth to be around 400GB per second, which is still plentiful. So the big question is, what type of specifications are we going to be looking at this particular card? Well, if we were to look at the older Titan X and the 980 Ti, both of these of course come from our old buddies over at Maxwell, then the two GPUs are pretty similar to one another. The boost clock and the base clocks are pretty much indistinguishable from one another. That's 1000 and 1075 megahertz respectively. Obviously, if you're doing maximum overclocking and all that stuff, you might get a little bit more or a little bit less out of the other, or one of the other. However, the big change is that the Titan X, once again this is the Maxwell derivative, has 12 gigabytes of RAM compared to 6, but the big change is that it has 3072 CUDA cores, while the 980 Ti has just 2816. That's only around 10% difference, which is not exactly a huge number. If you were to compare that to the current lineup of Nvidia's GPUs, you have the Titan X, which is sitting at around, well, not even around, I can tell you the exact number, 3584, while the 1080 Ti, has 2560. Although it is worth noting that the boost clock of the Titan X is considerably lower, at just around 1530, while the 1080 is 1733, and this once again assumes no user overclocking. In terms of the specifications of the card, it really comes down to the number of CUDA cores that Nvidia decide to cut away from the presumably Titan-based core, and then of course that will be the hand-me-down to the GTX 1080 Ti. Once again, the Titan X, the Pascal derivative, has 3,584 CUDA cores. Now what we do know, of course, is there are 128 CUDA cores per SM unit. So for example, 2 SM units is 256, and so on and so on. So if one was to bring up a calculator and have 3,584, do a division of 128, we come up with a grand total of 28 SM units. Naturally, the 2,560 in the GTX 1080, the vanilla 1080 that is, if you divide that by 128, you come up with 20 SM units. Okay, so we're all good. So the question, of course, then remains, how much will Nvidia cut? What the damage will be? Well, honestly, we just don't know yet. I'm going to presume it's going to obviously be higher than 22. So if I had to be providing you guys a tentative number, it's probably going to be somewhere around the lines of 22 minimum, but most likely 24 to, let's say, 26. If it is 24, you're looking at 24 times 128. Yes, I'm doing this calculation on the fly, which is 3,072. On the other hand, if it's 26 times 128, then you're looking at around 3,328, which is slightly less than 10% difference than the Titan, which once again puts the numbers at pretty respectable numbers if I'm honest, but obviously your mileage will definitely vary. So the big question, of course, is, well, should you buy it? And unfortunately, it's a very difficult decision. I've had a number of people message me at the moment and say, dude, should I upgrade? And it's a really, really weird time to upgrade at the moment, because Christmas means you're going to get some really good deals. And unfortunately, we do not know the performance of Vega, and we don't know what the performance, the theoretical performance of the 1080 Ti can be. I would probably make the assumption that Vega is going to be faster than Pascal. The only reason I theorize that is Vega can't be cheaper than Pascal, and the reason I make that assumption is HBM2 memory is kind of expensive. The only way it could possibly be cheaper is if there were some cards in the Vega lineup, and it's possible because we do know there's Vega 11, which are going to just use regular GDDR5 or GDDR5X memory, and that's certainly a probability or a possibility given the sheer number of cards which supposedly are going to comprise the Vega lineup. I guess it depends really on the release dates that both companies decide to go for, as well as the pricing. Since this card is probably not going to be released until at the very least a few days after CES, I would probably wait to see how the ground lies. My theory is that if Nvidia are going to release this card, AMD will probably get wind of it, and at least if there's any mercy in the universe, they'll say, we're going to release Vega at X, because at the very least we have a tentative release date of Ryzen, which is once again in Q1 2017, which is still a bit of a gap because it's like when in 2017. I'm going to make the assumption it's not going to be January, but then again, for all I know, it could be January the 4th, but then it doesn't really make sense. It's probably going to be at some point after CES, so that obviously you can have that press build up and the anticipation, then it has to go to reviewers, and then obviously once the reviewers get it, it's probably going to ship to retail, and once retail get it, they're invariably going to leak a few samples so Joe can get it on the forums, and he can probably make some checks himself, and then overclocking samples are going to probably start leaking out, and eventually it's going to hit retail. So who the hell knows? My best guess, and I'm probably completely wrong, I am not friends with Dr. Lisa Su in real life, so I don't know what their release schedule is going to be. But, as usual, stick with us here at RGT for more information. Now, I will be putting out the Vega video. I've had a couple of people message me asking me about that. It's going to be as soon as possible. I'm pretty busy, obviously, with the Christmas period as well. And I'm still working this week, which kind of is going to suck. But I should have it up with any luck tomorrow or the day after. I've finished the script, so now I need to do the editing, do the audio recording, and a few other bits and bobs. So definitely stick with me for that. So normal stuff, if you've liked the video, definitely subscribe and, well, you know, like the video. That made some sense, I think. And, yeah, comment what you would be willing to pay for the tie, or are you just going to be waiting for Vega? I think if you've already got like a 1080, there's probably no point in upgrading at this point. And if you've got like a 980 Ti, unless it's a very limited time offer, I would say the 980 Ti is still a bloody good card. I would probably just wait, to be honest, and see what Vega's got in store for you. But obviously, at the end of the day, it is your money, and I'm not telling you what to do with it. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.